we're doing this summer specifically for alumni. And so we're so glad that you came and so excited that you popped in. We know these are odd times, but we know this is a great opportunity to look at where you are in your career and where you want to go. So again, thank you. And again, before I jump into the presentation, my name's Danny. Danny Pape. I am the Career Center Director at UCCS, and I started in that role in February. So luckily I got here right before everything started, but really excited for this unique opportunity to help elevate career services for our current students and alumni. And so I know that's how this really works and affects you. So the first topic here is we're going to be talking about avoiding the job search panic during a pandemic. So one thing I really want to note before I get started too is that these are odd times. And so if you are found yourself job searching, or if you're in a role but you're not happy with the role that you're in and you're looking at changing careers or changing opportunities, there are some realities that'll come with that because of the pandemic, but there are some really cool opportunities to actually look at how your skill sets can be used in different areas, industries, positions. So that's kind of what we'll talk about today. So couple things too with WebEx. So some of you may use WebEx pretty consistently. Some of you may use some of the other platforms. Please try to keep yourself muted to minimize feedback for us. There will be an opportunity to engage here, but we want to make sure we're able to give you the information that you need. If you want to open your chat, that is definitely something you should and can do. We will be asking for feedback throughout the presentation, and there will definitely be time at the end for you to ask questions and help us kind of learn what's important to you. So please don't be afraid to open the chat and see what others are saying. You can type in questions. You can ask for help here. I have colleagues on the call that can help you navigate through those things. So just a quick technology and we'll keep on flowing through. So to give you a roadmap of where we're going today, our goal is to spend about 25 to 30 minutes with you to kind of share some things that are happening because of the pandemic around job searching and engaging in that. So we'll start with talking about what are your fears around job searching during a pandemic. Then we'll flow into a little bit of some of the job search myths that exist, as well as realities, things you really need to know because of what's going on currently in the world. We'll walk through the job search timeline with pre and post pandemic implications. So I want you to be thinking about kind of how some of this stuff might affect looking for work or looking for jobs. We'll review some main resources that exist for you and some things that we want you to take advantage of, and then we'll kind of end with some Q&A. All right, so in the chat function, here's where I'm going to ask you to engage a little bit. If you could type, what are your fears while job searching during the pandemic? Or if you would rather kind of maybe put in what you're hoping to get out of this webinar in there. I'm gonna allow about a minute or two for that to happen. So I'm gonna go silent and allow you all to chat and type into the chat function. So some good ones are coming in so far. So even if there are jobs available, limitation in job availability, so that's pretty similar. Last in, first out, if they have layoffs because of what's going on. Afraid that there are only open jobs in certain industries like fast food, grocery, healthcare, things that maybe that you're not qualified for or aren't a fit for what you're looking for. Known as hiring, so how do I find a job? Lots of competition, good. Allow just a couple more seconds here. Exposure while interviewing, that's a really good one. So, because of COVID, how do interview process look? Seems like a lot of companies aren't really willing to hire people. So how do you market yourself to get them to understand that you could be a really good employee? Very good. What value you're bringing? Good. Keep throwing those in there throughout the presentation. And we'll make sure we're getting to as much of that knowledge and information as possible. If I don't hit on something today, do not hesitate to reach out to us in the Career Center and me specifically, and I would be more than happy to kind of talk through your specific situation. All right, so some job search myths. These are things that exist out there that a lot of people believe but actually aren't true. So job searching is a process. And what I mean by that is something that it's a process you go through to ultimately get a new position, a new job, or find something that you want. What's important with that is processes aren't perfect. You're not going to do it perfectly, but it doesn't mean you can't be successful. And a lot of people think job searching starts with just applying for stuff, putting your name out there, throwing resumes out. But what you'll find with my job search timeline is there's actually a lot of things you should do before applying for positions. Job postings represent the majority of openings in the market. Now, I know a lot of you as alumni, probably know this, but the majority of positions out there are filled through networking, through word of mouth. And so it's going to be important that you don't just spend all of your time behind a computer screen, even though that feels odd during this pandemic, because that's about the only thing we can do is spend a lot of time behind a computer screen. I get this a lot. A resume must show a logical progression of jobs and increased responsibility. That's just not true either. So it's okay if you did 5 years in an industry, switched to a different industry, and kind of had to start at the bottom and work your way up. Or you took your skill set and you wanted to use it in a different context or different mode. That's something that's become very apparent now and actually expected. So 20, 30, 40 years ago, you might have had a very logical step-by-step process of, okay, I started in sales, you started at entry level, and then you worked your way up the sales organization. Nowadays, companies actually like the more well-rounded candidate. You did 5 years in sales, then you went over to finance, you did 5 years in finance, and then you decided to go a different route. So just know that you don't have to have that very traditional ladder to showcase your skill set or what you're doing. And then the last myth that exists out there is changing careers is nearly impossible. We know that's not true, particularly of what I just mentioned around, companies are looking for more well-rounded skill sets. But because of the pandemic, companies are now saying, okay, we can take skill sets from other industries or other areas, and we can utilize that within the work that we're doing. So people have to get creative, and don't be afraid to sell that story that you have. So there are some realities, some pandemic realities that you have to understand. So first, patience and resiliency right now are important skills to showcase. So companies want to know, how are you dealing with, if you were let go or if you had a layoff, how did you deal with that? Did you make the best of it? And were you able to gain some opportunity to do better? Also, a lot of you are probably at home with children, right? You're maybe trying to work and job search and taking care of and teaching your children if they're in the school age. That shows a lot of resiliency and patience, and you need to be able to talk about those things. So you might have some stories now that can equip you with that. Certain industries have been hit harder than others, right? So I know in the chat function, I saw someone talk about, well, are the only jobs available in healthcare and other industries. There are going to be some industries. One in Colorado that's a big one that's been hit, of course, is tourism, right? Hospitality. People aren't coming and spending time in Colorado vacation right now because they're not allowed to, or they can't, or they don't feel safe. And so knowing that is going to be really helpful. Recruitment disruption is real. What I mean by that is the typical timeline a company would have used to hire a position may look very different now. In some cases, it could be quicker. They could have a high need because that position might be deemed essential, or in other cases, it could be, well, if we can hold off on hiring that position for 3 to 6 months, that might be good for our financial timeline. So you have to know that the typical financial or recruitment timeline may look a little bit different. And then something that I want to own as well is competition is fierce. Please know that because of unemployment, because there are really qualified candidates out there looking for work, you're going to be facing that, and know that that's okay. But I still want you to focus on what can you bring, what value do you have that you can bring to an organization. All right, so I'm going to go into the job search timeline. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you kind of on the left is going to be pre-pandemic kind of things that you would have thought about in terms of defining your job target, and then on the right will be things that you now have to kind of layers you have to add on to that because of what's happening. So we'll kind of start there. So the first thing you need to do within your job search is define your job targets. Okay, so these are the kind of the goals or the industries or the types of positions you're going to target. And it's okay to have multiple. So it's okay to say, you know, I think my skill set can be used in sales, finance, or working in nonprofits where I'm fundraising. And it's okay to know and understand that those might not even be very relevant to each other, but knowing that your skill sets could be used within that. So before you even do that, though, you need to define your skill set. So what are the things that you can bring, and how do you how are you going to tell that story? So I'll kind of add to that over time. Focus is really important. So focus means I should never hear you. I would not want to hear someone say, well, I just need to find a job anywhere, any industry, doesn't matter. When you don't have that focus, you're less likely to take the steps needed to do that, and eventually your job search kind of runs out because you don't know exactly where you're going. So focuses are really important. So if you go on to post-pandemic, you take those job targets and you say, are these really attainable during this time, right? So if you want to work, again, if you wanted to be a general manager of a hotel, this might not be the time to target that job target. They're probably not hiring. They're probably figuring out what's next within their organization. Also, figure out how your skills can translate to other industries or type of work. This is really important, particularly right now. So when you kind of list out what your skills look like, figure out where that might fit within other industries that you hadn't thought about that are hiring currently. And we can help you figure out some of those organizations that are. So to kind of keep going down that career skill set mindset, there's this concept out there called the career competencies. All right, so you'll see 8 there, eight kind of skills or competencies listed. What I would do is I would take those and try to start, filling in with your own bullet points where you've showcased those skills. These come from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and these are skills that, regardless of industry or discipline, are important. All right, so this is kind of what this helps me do as someone who's not, I'm not a strong writer. It's not something I consider myself good at. This helps me kind of come with language and skill sets that I can talk about that feel tangible and real. All right, so take these 8 and really list out where you've gained those skills. Now, it's okay if you don't have what I would consider a strong skill set in each one of them. So don't worry too much about that. All right, so that's all step 1, which is job search, focusing your job targets. Step 2 is networking. Now, I know a lot of you know this and a lot of you are doing this, but it's still really important to note out. So pre-pandemic, what we tended to focus networking on face-to-face, right? It's how you really get someone's attention. It's a really good way to kind of learn where that person's going and be able to read those emotions. And you have to be good at connecting the dots. So it's not just about thinking about direct networking relationships, but an example is my aunt is an accountant. I don't want to be an accountant. It's not something I'm good at. So it would be easy to say, well, my aunt can't really help. My aunt can't help me network with what I'm looking for. But she works for a very large company where she does work for lots of different departments and partners. So if I were able to kind of say to my aunt, can you connect me to someone who works in your finance department or who works in your supply chain department? Now I'm starting to connect the dots and make things happen, right? So don't always worry about direct connections. A lot of times you have to look for those indirect connections. Also, networking is not trying to trick someone into doing something for you. It's not schmoozing. It's not. It has nothing to do with trying to get someone to do something that they're not comfortable doing. It's about having mutually beneficial relationships. So I tell students this all the time: what you can add value to any conversation. If you're talking to, let's just say, Nike, what can you tell Nike if you're meeting with the VP of marketing to help you, to help them. I mean, you can talk about how you as a customer think about their brand. So you can add value to conversations, even if you don't feel like you have the expertise of the person in the position you're talking about. Now, post-pandemic, we're probably not going to be able to meet face-to-face with people, right? But we can leverage technology. We can use LinkedIn more. We can, of course, use things like Zoom and WebEx more, and we can engage. You can still have those conversations with people through informational interviews. So that's where you reach out to someone else and say, I want to learn more about what you do as the VP of marketing, for example, right? And I think there's an appetite right now for that because people are working from home and they don't always get the connection with people that they did in the office. So if an alumni or someone reaches out to them and says, I want to learn more about what you do, I think people get really excited about that in these times. So reach out to those people, get connected, learn more. And an informational interview is just that. You're gaining information. You're not asking for a job. You're not asking for any of that. Now, some of that may come up in conversation, but please reach out to your network. And UCCS has one of the best networks out there. All right, so moving into step 3. So as you can see, we're doing a lot of work before we ever apply for a job here. So essential skills and competencies. So what you have to now go do is you have your job targets, you're starting to network with people. Now you can look at job descriptions and look for themes. Okay, so pre-pandemic, that would be something you would do pretty regularly. You can go to Indeed.com, you can go to some of the national sites and just look at some themes within job descriptions for those targets. Of course, direct experience mattered pre-pandemic, but what you're going to find out post-pandemic, it actually is not quite as critical that you have direct experience in that job target. And telling your story is really important too, and thinking about how you're going to stand out from that fierce competition that's happening. Post-pandemic, though, we're going to leverage skills now into different industries and jobs that fit really well for you and for your skill set. So we're going to say, okay, well, I don't have direct experience in this, but I have these skills that I've gained through my experiences that really translate well to this position. You're going to be really good at telling that story. And then remember to continue to leverage technology. So one of my favorite activities I do with students, current students, is I tell them to take a job. So say they find a job they actually want to apply to, take a job description and put it into a Wordle. So here's an example of a marketing position that I put into a Wordle. And what that tells you is that the words that are the biggest are the most important within that job description, right? So those are the things I would focus on in my resume and cover letter, which I'll talk about here in a sec. So that's a really simple technology, free, that you can take job descriptions and what words are most important, what skill sets are they most looking for, and that'll help you focus and use the same language within the words or within the documents you send in and or within the interview process. So step 4 is hiring methods. All right, so you've done some pre-work, you really know a lot about the skill sets you can bring. Now you have to take those job targets and figure out what's the typical recruiting method, timeline, salary for those positions. What's the size of the business in industry? Because a small company's process is going to look very different than a large Fortune 500. So you need to know those things going in, and what are the best ways to apply? What are the documents you need to apply? Post-pandemic, though, remember that some of that research you do, you're going to have to be understanding and flexible that there is some disruption there. There is a process disruption. So what could have normally took 3 months to go through a job search process for one company may take 6, or for some positions may take less than that because they're ready to move a little quicker. We have now gone companies are completely reliant on technology during the recruitment process. So you're going to interview through a system like WebEx or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and you have to be comfortable with that because that's going to feel a little bit different than interviewing on the phone even, or of course in person. So just know that there's some things that have changed. You should still do that research, but there's probably going to be just some disruption to what's happening. So now we are at that prepare and apply stage. So going back to that myth I talked about, this is the time you actually can apply after you've done a lot of that prep work, right? The biggest mistake people make in their job search is they start here. They start at step 5 without going through the other steps. So some of these things I know you've heard, but you have to tailor your resume and cover letter so you can use some of that research you've done, use some of the similar language within the job description or on that company's website when you are tailoring your resume and cover letter. Never shotgun your resume out. And what I mean by that is don't send the same resume and cover letter to 50 people. I would rather you apply really well to 10 places where you tailor each resume and cover letter to that position and to that company. So language is critical. So using the same language they use can help you get through systems, because those large Fortune 500 use software to look and see if people were using keywords from the job description or from their website. So remember that language is critical. Going post-pandemic or current pandemic, competition's fierce. So how do you stand out? So I had a student who applied to Trader Joe's headquarters up in Boston. And what he did is he made his resume look like a menu because they're food related, right? And then he went one step further and he didn't send that in via online. He actually mailed it to the company. Now, this was all pre-pandemic, so it's not something you could probably do now. Most people are working from home. But he took a standard resume and made it and connected it to the company. That was a little bit of a risk. He was doing something that probably the majority of candidates didn't, but it made him stand out and he ended up getting hired by that organization. So how do you stand out? And then think about your value proposition. So I know earlier when I asked what your fears were is how do I know I'm a good employee, but how do I let a company know that process? That's probably more important now than ever. So thinking about what value are you going to create for that company? And that'll be done through your research and through some of the work that you're doing in terms of what you're currently doing in your job. So we can help you write a value proposition. I can help you with that and what value are you going to create. So here's a task that I would always do before applying. So over on the left, you're going to see the responsibilities and skills from a job position or from a job description for a career coaching position. And then what you're going to see me do here is I am showcasing in my resume where I've highlighted that specific skill or responsibility, okay? So it's really important to really denote where on your resume or cover letter you've highlighted that skill or responsibility that you'll have on the job. Now, I know that I took I correlated each skill or responsibility to something on my resume, but I want you to know you can still apply for something if you don't have all of the things mapped out. So say I only had 8 of the 10, still apply. Make the company tell you no. You cannot get the job if you don't apply, and you don't have to have all the qualifications. So make sure that you're mapping that out though, to make sure you are tailoring that resume to what they're looking for. All right, now we're at the interviewing phase. All right, so pre-pandemic, it was about telling your story. Practicing is really important, and a lot of interviews are behavioral interviewing based. And what that means is they're asking you questions like, tell me about a time when, and then they put on a scenario. So tell me about a time you worked in a group. How did that work? What did you do? What did you gain from that experience? All of those things are still true, but now post-pandemic, if we go over to the right side, you're going to be interviewing typically using technology. So a lot of companies are using artificial intelligence within their early part of their interview process. So what that's doing is that's a program that's really reading your eye contact, your your personality, how engaged you were during that interview, and they're giving reports back to those recruiters and those organizations. So that's why it's important to practice. So I know I put practice on the left side there. Practicing is just as critical, if not more critical, here post-pandemic, because we need to be comfortable in settings like this. And it feels a little bit different. Also, this may sound odd, but your first interview with the company may not even be with a real person. It may be with what I'm calling a robot. That's where a robot will ask you questions and then you'll record yourself answering those questions. A recruiter, a real person, is going to watch those, I promise, in almost all cases, but you will never have interacted with anyone. That's unique, that's different, that's hard. So please practice and we can help you do that. Also, how you stand out is really important because of the fierce competition. So again, I want you to continue thinking about the value proposition you can bring to that position, that company, and how you're going to help them move their mission, vision, values forward. So be ready for technology and practice. Let us help you with that. We're ready to do it here in the Career Center and help you to be ready to handle that. Step 7 and 8 I put together, but that's the follow-up and finish with grace phase. So pre-pandemic, you thought a lot about thank you notes, following up with companies a couple weeks after you interviewed with them, and then it was really important to reflect on the process. Those things are all still important, but now post-pandemic, you want to think about things like, well, I should probably send an email versus a handwritten note because that person, that recruiter, is probably not at their office. So there's no way they're going to give you their personal address, but you have their email address. So you can still write a really outstanding thank you letter via email. Handwritten, of course, we all love handwritten notes, and there's nothing better, but this probably isn't the time to do that just because you're not going to be interviewing in person most likely. Understanding timelines. It's really on you as the candidate to ask those questions. So what's the timeline for this position? How is it different now that we're in this pandemic time? Are you looking to move quick? Are you looking to take your time? You can ask those things during the interview process to really get a good understanding of what you're doing and what to expect. Never be afraid to ask those questions. You deserve to know that as a candidate. And then last is, once you do get hired, onboarding is going to be completely different depending on the industry. So you most likely will have to onboard from home in a lot of cases, or I know some companies may bring you in for just a couple days and social distance you, and then you'll get back to your home and do most of your work and training from there. So just know that that process may feel a little bit different. So that's the job search timeline. So 8 steps, and remember, it doesn't start with applying. It starts with really understanding what you're trying to target, how you can build your network, and understanding the resources that exist, and then you can go into more of that application phase. So some key resources for you. We have a new system called Handshake, which as alumni, you have access to that. So all you have to do is go to the career.uccs.edu website and get some information on signing up as an alum. You won't have an account unless you're in a recent alum, and we'll quickly approve you within that. Handshake gives you access to over 500,000 organizations across the United States that are hiring and looking. So it is our job and internship board for our students and alumni. Please take advantage. It's an amazing site. Here's a couple of links to LinkedIn and some other companies, some other sources out there have put out who's actually hiring right now and who's not. So that you don't waste your time, because you might find a position that was posted 30 days ago for a company, but that company forgot to take it off. And so maybe they're not hiring for that, but it still looks like they are. We want you to be able to find that out. So take advantage of those great resources. Schedule a virtual appointment with us. So if you just email our careers@uccs.edu website, you can set up a one-on-one appointment with one of our career coaches. Amazing opportunity to really dive into your situation. It's something you have complete free access to, and that's awesome. So that's something that we're really proud of. We also just started a blog. We know people are digesting information differently during these times. So if you would rather just kind of do some reading and start to figure out if some of this is right for you, please bookmark our blog. It's a really great opportunity to learn from those in the community that are doing some of this work day to day. So before I get to questions, I just want to remind you that we're going to be doing these presentations all throughout the summer. So as you can see, as we move into the summer, we'll be talking about what career resources exist. So a little bit of a deeper dive into Handshake and LinkedIn. We're going to talk about resiliency and how to tell your story better. We're going to talk a little bit about remote work. Is it here for good? Is it something that's a good fit for you, or something that you just want to kind of talk about what's happening in the moment? The evolving workplace. in the future will be our next webinar, which will talk a lot about, okay, well, who is hiring and how can you be successful? And then our last workshop is going to be designing your work life. So there's this concept out there called design your life that really helps you think about where you fit, what you want to do, and where you want to be. So that's kind of our webinar series. So I'll kind of open it up for questions. If you want to throw those into the chat, Claire and I will try to answer those the best we can.
All right, so Danny, it looks like we have our first question, and it says, is there a limit to the number of one-on-one coachings from the Career Center?
So there is not. We will help you as much as you need. We know some people want to meet weekly because that's what they need. We know other people, they need one meeting, they got the info they need, and they're able to run, and they'll just check in when they can. So we can work with you based off of your situation and what works best for your learning style and or your style in terms of how you like to gather information. Any other questions?
There was an earlier question. Hold on, let me scroll back up.
So I saw one here. I'll read it out. Since the pandemic is making the market limited, should our mentality be to take any temporary job that comes along, or two, to focus on what we really want to do in the long run? That is a really good question from Maggie. So to not give a blanket answer, I think it depends on the situation. But what we're going to try to help you do is try to figure out, all right, what are those long-term goals, and what is there some roles that, while may not be the perfect response to that long-term goal, they're going to be skills that are going to help you eventually get there. Now, again, I know every situation is different, and there might be a time where you just need to take a job because you've got bills to pay and rent and mortgage and things piling up. So we'll work through that with you. But please know our goal is to help you get to work that feels meaningful and happy for you. So the design your life stuff, I think, will fit really well for you, Maggie. I think you'll like that webinar.
There was a
go ahead, Claire.
Oh, there was another question about if this is being recorded, and I just wanted to answer. I know it was answered in the chat, but we did record it, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel a little later on. But just wanted to put that out there too for those who are having some tech issues. There were some folks who couldn't see screens, things like that. We are posting it afterwards.
Thank you, Claire. So another question, it looks like, so what resources do you guys think works well for students who graduated within the last year? So good question. So I would really make sure you're taking advantage of the handshake system. That is really targeted at entry level, those just graduating or those that are still in school. And it's just an amazing resource. It's opened up the amount of opportunities to us, fivefold. So last I checked, there were over 2,500 active jobs in the system. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of that. But I also think potentially meeting with us as the Career Center could help you too, and making sure we're really targeting resources for you. This Career Center world is very resource rich. So that's a good thing and a bad thing for candidates. Sometimes there's too many things to look at and there's too many resources that exist. But what we'll help you do is figure out the resources that are the best fit for you because of the industry you're targeting or the type of work you're trying to gain. So it looks like Anne asked a question. Do you prefer we submit our resume and other work samples when requesting a one-on-one appointment so you can get a sense of our experience background and how to elevate our personal value proposition? So yes, so we would probably have you bring those documents with you to that first virtual meeting. So probably sending them ahead of time would never hurt. You'll know who you're meeting with. So if it's Janet Farley in our office, you will know that when we make that appointment. So we can give you her email, and you can email some of those documents ahead of time so she can kind of take a look at that. She'll probably ask, the first question she'll ask is, all right, well, what questions do you have about this document and how can we dive in further? So yes, definitely bring documents ready if you have them. If you don't, that's okay. We can help you start to develop this. All right, it looks like Ian asked, I secured a job, but there are a lot of mandatory tests and it's commission only. I would like to find another job, but I'm concerned about leaving and not having something else. That is definitely something we'll help you think through. We never want you to make rash decisions. We never want you to kind of not fully think about what's best. But we also understand sometimes, a job may kind of, put you in a safety, maybe your health is suffering for some reason, or you feel unsafe at work. We'll help you think through how to make those decisions, whether it's, you need to make a decision today or you have a little bit of time to consider because of your situation. So we can help you through that, Ian, and help you think through what's the best way to kind of work through leaving that job and looking for others in that timeline. Any other questions for us? I'm going to go back one slide and just remind you we'll be continuing to do these webinars. We hope you found them valuable. Our goal is to keep them to 30 to 40 minutes so that you can get back to work in some cases. For others, get back to taking care of their children. Our goal is to get you information as quickly as possible. Please let us know how we can support you. Reach out to us at careers@uccs.edu, and we will get back to you quickly to either set up an appointment or to connect further. So thank you so much for your time and energy. I'll stay on for a few minutes in case more questions come in via the chat, and we will build from there. Thanks all.